Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is 4 Paws in a Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today I'm going to talk to you all about the books that I have read so far in the month of March. So March has been a really weird month. So I read 28 books in 28 days in February and then hit a massive reading slump and didn't finish my first book of March until like the 5th or 6th. It was slow going. But since then, I have done really well. I've done like a weekend readathon where I read a bunch of books. I read a book on a stream for the Not Your Mom's Boozy Book Club. So like, I've read 12 books so far in March. So I definitely wanted to do a mid-month wrap-up, so that's what we're going to do today. If you are new to my channel, during the mid-month wrap-ups, I'm not going to do any stats or anything like that. I'm just going to talk about the books in chronological order as I've read them, and then when we get to the end of the month, that's when we'll do the stats, genre breakdown, all that fun stuff, and I talk about it in order of like how I liked the book. So the first book that I read was Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I read this one for Tour.comathon, which I am a co-host for, so you'll see a lot of tour titles on here. And it was a middle-of-the-road book. It was a fine book. I think that the second half of this book was actually really good, but the first half really dragged on and was kind of slow, and I didn't really understand what we were doing. I didn't necessarily like the character. I swear, like every other page, he was talking about going out to smoke a cigarette, and I was like, I get it. You have a nicotine addiction. Can we move things along? But then we get into the second half of the story, and I think it was trying to do this like social commentary about classism and racism, and I think it ended up doing it really well. I just wish that the second half of the book had been like the whole book. Essentially, this is in a near future dystopian world where the Earth is kind of dying, and so there are space colonies that are happening like on the moon and other planets and things like that. Unfortunately, it's really expensive to go to these space colonies, right? And so because of that, there's been this like classist divide, and it talks about how the suburbs are emptying and the ghetto is getting larger, and everything that kind of goes along with that. Essentially, this book is trying to say that all of the white people are going to the space colony. And I think that the commentary that this book was doing was really important, and it was really, really well done. But unfortunately, it took so long for me to get into the story that I was really, really struggling with it. So it gets a 3 star. This book is written in a non-linear timeline, but you don't really know that at the beginning. And so that was another thing that like the writing style, I just didn't jive with. I do think that there's an audience for this, and I think that there's a ton of high reviews on this book. But unfortunately for me, it didn't work out. Next up, I finished Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun. This is the 3rd installment in the Finlay Donovan series that came out earlier this year. And I gave this book 3.5 stars. It is my least favorite book of the 3, but by no means do I hate this book. It is just as ridiculous as the previous 2. Essentially, they are trying to find a dirty cop, and to do that, they join a citizens police academy and go through all of these different like training things, and there's this like competition on like police academy stuff, and it was ridiculous and insane and really funny. I have a really good time reading these. I finished this book in like a day. I think while I was on a plane. I want to say that this was a book that I was listening to while I was traveling. And it was fun. Like, it was a good time. These are not books that are like quality literature or high-end whatever, but they're a ride. So I have fun. I'll continue reading the series for sure, even though like they are kind of like declining in my ratings, but I don't hate the books yet, so I'll still read them. Next up, I read Mysterious Ways by Abby Evans, and this was a book that I was reading for the SPFBO finalist, so I have a whole vlog. I will link it up above, and this book was fine. I had really high hopes for this book. It was actually one of my highest rated in my predictions, mostly because it was queer, so I was going to get bonus points for that. But it unfortunately really let me down. And I was actually talking about this today. 3-star rating is so interesting because it can be a book that I had really high expectations for, or it can be a book that just, I read it, it exists, it was fine, or it can be a book that like is a good book, but just like I'm not the audience for. So in this case, it was a book that I had really high expectations for, and it let me down. It disappointed me. The world building in this was disappointing at best. This is a really interesting, unique world with demons and an underworld and a matriarchal society where women are in power, and the author just kind of like scraped the surface with that world and with that magic system and all this stuff, and we didn't really get to like know anything else. This book was under 300 pages, and it definitely could have used another 100 pages and been probably a pretty fantastic book. But unfortunately, I didn't love it. But like I said, I have full life thoughts in my vlog, so check that out. So far this month, I've done really well with my Kerplunk TBR. I think I only have maybe 3 or 4 books left on that very large TBR, which is good. So the next one I read was If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. My audio hold was going to go back on Libby. Like, I had to speed this thing up so that I could finish it. But I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. And I actually really, really enjoyed this. This is a book about a woman who is plus size. She is in the fashion design world, and she ends up going on to The Bachelor, or like this world's version of The Bachelor, as a plus size character, and everyone loves her. She ends up getting all the way to the finals. This is technically a Cinderella retelling, a very loose retelling. I do love the fact that the stepmother and the stepsisters are not like evil as most Cinderella retellings tend to be. I really liked that. The one thing that I did not like about this book, and I didn't really take off points for it necessarily, but I wanted smut in this book. There's so much tension, so much angst, but no smut. It's a closed door romance. And I understand closed door romances do have their place in the literary world. They are very important, and like, I'm not trying to fault this book for that, but I wanted the smut. Anytime we have a plus size main character in a romance, it's just really cool to have that representation going all the way into the bedroom. So that's the only thing that I didn't like about this book. And I knew going into it, it wasn't a smutty book. And I still wanted it. I still wanted it. But still, 4.5 stars. Really, really liked this one. And this was actually the first book that I finished by Julie Murphy. I DNF'd the Christmas one, whatever that book was. And that one was co-author. Like, she was a co-author for it. And I didn't get very far into that book. So this was the first book that I'd actually read by her. And I really liked it. Next up was the book that I read all on sprints, and so I'll link those sprints down below if you want to like watch us kind of go into the spiral of this book. And that's The Pledge by Cale Dietrich. This is actually the Not Your Mom's Boozy Book Club pick for the month of March, so the live show will be on my channel. We'll be talking about this book, but we did, both Cal and I read the whole thing on stream. It was a lot of fun. We'll definitely be doing that again in the future. It's a YA horror, but I actually kind of think it's more new adult because it is about a freshman in college, and it's a horror romance. So if you are looking for a hybrid genre book for Realmathon, this one definitely would count, because it is very much half a queer romance and half a slasher. This is about a boy who as a kid saw a murder, or like an actual like slasher type thing happen, and he survived it, and then he went on to college, and he's kind of like infamous because of it. And then it starts happening again. Like, people at his college start getting killed off, like people in his frat. And you don't know who it is. The writing is actually really, really fantastic because the whole book is told in first person with like the main character. But then when a killing happens, it like switches to third person. And so I just thought that was really interesting because like you knew that a killing was going to happen in that chapter because it would switch perspectives. It was actually like really, really well done. So you're going to question why I only gave it 3.5 stars? Well, I hated the ending. Absolutely hated the ending. Cal and I had so many theories about where this book was going, how the story was going to end, and who we thought was going to be the killer, up until, quite literally, the last few pages. And then it was none of those, and the one that I thought, or the one that it ended up being, was a little lazy. My opinion, personally. So I gave it 3.5 stars. It was very well written, but like the ending just like absolutely like dropped it a whole star. Very excited to talk about this one later on in the month with Cal. It's gonna be a good time. Next up, I read The Boy in the Black Suit by Jason Reynolds. This was a book that I was reading for the Unhaul project. It's a book that I've had on my shelf for 2 years, and so if I didn't read it, I had to unhaul it. I'm still gonna unhaul it because I only gave it 2.5 stars and I didn't really love it. This is very much a like lit fic, but for kids or for teenagers. It's very much a slice of life story. It's about a boy who his mother dies. He ends up going and working in a funeral, and he always wears this black suit so that like people will take him seriously. He wears it to school. He wears it like everywhere. It's very much a slice of life book. This boy had to grow up so quickly because his mother died, and then his father is an alcoholic, and he basically has to parent his father. So I definitely understand the appeal of it. I understand why people like it. I was just like waiting for something to happen, waiting for a catalyst to happen, and nothing ever really did. And so it was just like, I was just like waiting. And nothing came to fruition. So only gave this one 2.5 stars, and I will be unhauling it. Then I finished Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This was another book that I had actually saved from my original unhaul project because I hadn't finished it in January. And so I read it this month. And I also loved this. I don't know what it is about that very first unhaul project, but all of the books that I hadn't read yet ended up being 4 stars or higher. I gave this one 4 stars. This is very much like Top Gun meets Star Trek, almost. It's definitely like Top Gun in space. It's about these pilots that are trying to show off their skills, trying to show off, to their instructors so that they are picked for this, flight academy, essentially. And I very much enjoyed it, and I will be continuing on with the series. This was my very first Brandon Sanderson. I have another one on my TBR that I will be reading it. I have a project for it. Very excited about that one. Obviously, these are like his YA sci-fi books, and the other stuff is like adult fantasy. But, still excited to continue on with his books because he's very popular, especially here in Utah. And honestly, I'm really glad that I ended up reading it because I almost was like, it's fine. I'll just get rid of the book. If I want it, I'll get it again. If I decide I want it, but I really wasn't gonna, I don't know, I had very low expectations going into this, and I was pleasantly surprised. Another book that I read for Tour.comathon that was not actually on my TBR is Burning Roses by S.L. Huang. This is a book that I am reading for a video project that you'll see later on. This is an interesting novella. This is about 2 older, assassins, agents of justice, that kind of thing. One of them is Red Riding Hood and one is the Archer. And they want to retire. And so this is definitely like a fairy tale bingo board where we are just throwing every type of fairy tale and fantasy retelling at it and seeing what sticks, which I kind of love. Into the Woods is one of my favorite musicals. It's definitely an interesting concept when you can put a whole bunch of different fairy tales and mash them up together. And this definitely did that. Because it was basically these 2 characters getting together and swapping war stories and being well, remember that one time when da-da-da-da happened? And it would go into this fairy tale and inserting themselves into that fairy tale. The problem with this book actually came when we introduced a plot. Where they basically had to go back out and save the world one more time. And that's when the book started getting really, really rushed. I think that if we would have had a full-length novel with that plot, that could have been done well. Or we could have just not had a plot and just had these characters just griping and complaining for 150 pages. Because as it stood, it went, I liked the beginning, but once we introduced that plot, it just didn't work for me very much. So I gave this one 3 stars. Next up, I read Ship of Smoke and Steel by Django Wexler. This is Django Wexler's YA series. And you can definitely see the inspiration of Ashes of the Sun. There's a lot of, parallel characters to this, but done in a YA friendly way, I guess. Still has a sapphic romance, so we love that. Actually loved the sapphic love interest in this book. Would die for her, actually. This is about a girl who is a thief. She's just trying to collect money so that her sister can have a good life, so that she can basically be a princess, essentially. They are paying for that. She that's all she cares about is her sister's welfare. And then she is actually chosen to go onto this ship. Chosen is not the right word. Kidnapped? Question mark? Basically, they kidnap her sister and say, well, if you don't come and help us, then we're gonna kill her. This definitely had all of those strong character moments that Ashes of the Sun has. That's definitely Django's strength, and I loved that. My biggest complaint with this book was the world building, actually, because they're on this ship and it's talking about how big the ship is and how much like different areas of the ship and different things that are on the ship, and like how big is this ship? Because at first I was thinking pirate ship type thing, and now I'm thinking more like Star Trek ship, and like a city on a ship. That's kind of how this is going. So, I don't know, I'm really hoping that in book 2 we kind of explore that a little bit more, but I don't know, because the second one is called, like, City of Something, so I don't even know if we're on the ship anymore, honestly. But yeah, that was my only thing, is that I couldn't imagine the setting where they were and the ship that they were on. It baffled me. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Still really liked it. Will definitely be continuing on in the series. It was about that time that I just decided, you know what, screw my TBR. I'm doing pretty well. Let's pick something up that's not anywhere close to being on my TBR. And I picked up Secrets in the Dark by Darcy Coates. This is the second book following Voices in the Snow. And I gave this one 5 stars. This one was so good. Darcy Coates can do no wrong at this point. I've read 2 books of hers and they've both been 5 stars. And I've loved them. Really want to continue on because just like Voices in the Snow, this one ends on such a cliffhanger. Oh my gosh, the end of this book was fantastic. It was better than the first one, honestly. This book really opens up the world. In Voices in the Snow, it definitely feels like an isolated setting. They're mostly at this one like mansion house thing. And in this one, they are going out into different areas, trying to find her sister, trying to find her family, trying to find help, other people, that kind of thing. And we really learn about these zombie characters that are in the world now, and we really start to learn about these creatures that are in the world, that like why they are there, how they got there, that kind of stuff. And yeah, fantastic. This book is so good. And it is taking everything in me to not just binge the rest of the series. My buddy read this book with Rye from Rye's Reading Corner, and she's actually finishing the series. She's just going forward. She's on book 4 now. And I really want to join her because she said book 3 was amazing. So, you know, don't be surprised if you see book 3 at the end of the month. It might happen. Who knows? Next up, I read Into the Mist by PC Cass. This is a book that I was trying to finish out my R Fantasy bingo board. This is the one for Weird Ecology. And essentially, this is about a group of school teachers who are on this, like, retreat thing. And a nuclear explosion, something goes off. We're not really sure. And a green mist kind of pops up. And essentially this green mist kills or weakens men, like makes them very sick or kills them altogether. And it gives women superpowers. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. It did not work. The concept is fantastic. But in theory, great. In actuality, terrible, actually. I gave this book 2 stars. First off, it was kind of boring. The characters did not really have a lot of, like, tension. Did not have a lot of, like, they were not stressed. They were, like, still, like, talking about everyday things. I mean, there was this one character trying to get home to her kids and trying to make sure that they were okay. But, like, other than that, we were just, like, talking about normal life. And I was like, I'm bored. But then on top of that, and, like, definitely the worst, like, foul that this had was that it kind of felt turfy. We definitely, like, we only had the gender binary, and we did not expand at all. There was not a single trans person or non-binary person in this entire book. They just don't exist to the author, apparently, because there could have been an interesting, like, conversation about gender versus sex, and, like, how the mist did affect trans men or trans women, and, like, also what about non-binary people? We did not have any of those conversations. None of it. And so, like, for being a feminist manifesto, it did not do it well. It did not at all. Also, the men were really boring in this. There was a man in their group that was, like, basically trying to escape this mist. And, like, you would think that he would be terrified for his life. And he never was. So, that's weird. Lastly today, for the start of Taterthon, which is Lexi from Books with Lexi's Patreon readathon, I finished Ophelia After All by Raquel Marie. This is another book that was on my Kerplunk TBR and also on my 23 books to read in 2023. So I'm doing pretty well with that. Not gonna lie, there we go. Okay, so here's the thing. Kind of going back to that, what a 3-star rating is, because I gave this 3 stars. This was actually a really good book. It just wasn't the book for me. There is absolutely an audience for this book. The writing was fantastic. The characters were just adorable. But I am in my 30s, and I don't care about going to prom and who I'm going to prom with or who these characters are going to prom with. I didn't care about like most of this plot because it's high school drama, right? So had I had this book when I was a teenager, would have been life-changing, because it definitely talks about this character like coming out as queer and like identifying, like finding out how she identifies, and like there's so much representation in this book. There is a bisexual character, there's a pansexual character, there is ace representation, there's so much, right? And I love that. I love that this book exists, and I love that this book is in the world for teenagers. But for me, it's 3 stars because enjoyment is 20% of my rating. So like while the characters got a 4.5 on my rubric, my enjoyment was only a 2. And so like it balances it out. So like for this one specifically, like don't take my 3-star rating as something that like I didn't like the book. I didn't enjoy aspects of the plot of the book, but I am very glad that this book is out there and it exists. So if you are someone who likes YA books, I do think that this book would be something you would love. I just think I'm done reading specifically YA contemporary. Alright, so those are the books that I have read so far in the month of March. It's been a good month, and I fully expect for the second half to be just as great. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite book of the month has been so far, and if you're not feeling chatty, you can do a rose or a flower emoji for this book. That is all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button, then you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.